Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2. Hey there, hi there, ho there. How do you do? How do you do? How do you say? What do you do? I don't know. I'm trying to set things up, and here we go. Once again, this is Ralph Hayes Jr. coming to you over the system of tubes known as the Internet, in the mediocre imitation of the old-fashioned boob tube at the website known as YouTube. Coming to you once again, and I'm like, crap, doggone, little thing fall down, go boom, little links not working correctly. But as I was saying, this is Ralph Hayes Jr. coming to you live over the internet at just after 9 p.m. Suffering immense amounts of lag in order to bring to you that most stellar of radio programs, Spleen Squeezins. While it looks at me and pretends not to hear me. What the hell? Okay, this isn't working. What is this? Okay. Okay, here we go. Yeah. The settings were off kilter. That's what it was. Wild Wired Weezer. I'm just. I have a commission for Wild Wired Weezer. I can't even say his name anymore. I'm old and senile, and I lisp. I'm like Elmer Fudd. Ouch. Did you ever get like a cold sore or like a cut or a scab at the corner of your mouth? And it never quite heals right because you know, I've got a beard, and you know, and the scab keeps sticking to the hairs, and every time I open my mouth too large, it pulls at it. See if a randomizer gets us a little better sound selection here. Yeah. Snipping a little bit of hair off there. There we go. Alright. Let's see here. Let's see if I can actually do this with all these programs running simultaneously. Every time I try and do too much all at once, the computer's basically, what are you doing? Okay, that's a little loud. I'll turn it down a little bit. I have no way of knowing whether... Oh, there it goes. Here we go. Okay, I've got to fix this one drawing, and I've got to finish another. I've got to pull up the description and just see, the leg doesn't quite look right. I've been looking at it for hours and finally figured out what it needs. Just a little adjustment there. It's not much. See, it's supposed to be it's sort of supposed to be, you know, it's supposed to be a bear with the legs of a kangaroo. Nothing too unusual. Problem is I forgot to give him an ankle. There we go. Uh, it's kind of tricky. I think down at the end, when it all boils down to, I have to admit, I was never really, I don't know. I look at the stuff I draw, and I look at the stuff that other people draw professionally, and I go, yeah, this was not happening. I'm just not meant to be one of the big names or even one of the small names. It's just not happening. You know what? You know why I got into cartooning? Because when I was a little boy, I loved books. Okay, I loved books, especially science fiction. I'd eat science fiction up any chance I got it. Pure escapism, and I wanted to write stories as good as the ones I read. And of course, my writing sucked because I was like 10 years old. And I realized that it was a lot easier to draw a picture of what I was trying to describe than it was to tell it. And that drawing, every kid, if you've ever looked at the scribblings and doodles that kids make on their school folders and stuff. There we go. Every kid goes through a phase where they try and draw cartoons. They draw in a very cartoonish style. And I guess I got sort of stuck there for a while. For a while there, I sort of also entertained the notion of being a fine artist. One of the hangs up in a gallery kind of artists. But as time went by, that sort of faded. And I'll be honest, it was modern art that encouraged me the longest in that particular endeavor. Because you see all these people, these so-called modern artists, and they're making thousands of dollars and putting crap up in galleries, and you think, crap, if they can do it, no. There are passages mystic and arcane and indecipherable to us mere mortals that you have to pass through to become a highfalutin artist. Okay, I think that's... I'm sorry to say, it's just... I'm going to start over with that one. That nonsense again. Let's see, dashboard. Let's see here. Creator Studio. Here we go. Zippity dippity dippity doo dah. come on, computer. Alright, here we go. Waiting for it to turn up. Oh, mercy. More or less, yeah. Modern art as a money laundering scam, yeah. It's one way of putting it. See, lion, ibex. Let's see. Commissions. And, wild weasel. Some days I wonder if, like, wired weasel just has a friend with a lisp and a mean streak. Fin-foot troll, short-foot troll, long-foot, hoof-foot troll. Hand hooves. Goodness. All right, it's supposed to be a cross between his particular interpretation of trolls, and they're pretty mix and match. This one is supposed to be a cross between a lion and an ibex, which is a type of elk or you know, like horned, hooved, whatever. Oh, excuse me. Oh, topics. Okay. Information I should take a minute. Let you all know that the fundraiser, the So I Don't Lose My Hoe GoFundMe, is going on. I want to send out great big thank yous. Thank you very much. I don't know whether to list off the names or to just keep it anonymous, but I'll be sending them personal. I'll be sending them personal thank you emails to the donations. It's up to just under $2,000. That's just about 1/5 of my goal. 1/5 of the goal. The goal is to pay off the landlord and pay off the IRS, and hopefully have enough, hold back a little bit so I can pay the tax. I've got to consult with somebody on some tax information. I've got to determine, okay, do I count? I'm going to be paying my landlord a lump sum of about $5,000. Do I count that as do I count that in my expenses for this year? And is there any sort of deduction for being on a payment plan for 1 year through to the next with the IRS? I mean, there's got to be some sort of rational response here. There's got to be some sort of reasonable accommodation here, because with me paying the IRS every single month for almost 5 years, and because of that, being constantly behind, is there any way I can count is there any way I can count that constant expenditure towards it? Probably not. Probably not. And the thing of it is, getting a big lump sum means that it might push me up into another tax bracket. So if I do make the goal, I'm probably going to have to stuff about $1,000 of it into the bank, just so I maybe have enough to pay my taxes for this. When April 15th, 2019 rolls around, so I'll have something to give them, so I don't start this whole mess all over again. So you get the picture. So what do you do? Hooray! For those of you, www.imgur.com. It's an interesting little thing. Most interesting images of the day for the internet, kind of thing. People submit them and comment on them. Some of them are downright hysterical. There's one thing. One of the topics. One of the image topics is called story prompts. It's very fascinating writing ideas and suggestions that have popped up in conversations all over the web. And it's a particular topic. Let's see here. Here's one. Writing prompts. Quote, "You are the owner of a magic backpack. Every morning you stick your hand in, and it contains exactly what you need for the day. One morning it contains a gun." That's your story prompt. Of course, I like the comment right below it, "Dora the Destroyer." Ah! Swipers, stop swiping! Dora just went hardcore. And now here's an idea. Here's an idea for a TV series, an edgy Netflix TV series. A show about vigilante Victorian prostitutes hunting down Jack the Ripper. They never did figure out why he stopped killing, and most serial killers don't stop unless they are stopped. You know, he was just saying, you know. Comment, be right back, writing the script. It'd be an interesting twist on the concept, yeah. And I gotta agree with this one. The guy says, I hate all those too edgy for me theories about kids shows. You know, like Angelica dreaming up the Rugrats because, you know, she's supposed to be mentally traumatized from her mommy dying or something, or like Ed and Eddie children being trapped in hell and being ghosts. You know, and the cul-de-sac is actually purgatory. Or literally anything. It takes these lighthearted and fun kids shows and turns them into some tragic take of, rape or murder or misinformed mental illness. Now he says, so no, you know what? From now on, I'm going to do the exact opposite. Every cool, grim, dark show is now because of a bunch of children. Here's an idea for you. Game of Thrones. A middle school D&D campaign, Dungeons and Dragons campaign, with the most angry, vindictive dungeon master who has promised to kill everyone's player characters and their family by the end. Or here's another one. The Walking Dead is actually a bunch of kids playing zombie apocalypse in their neighborhood, and every time someone dies, it's because their parents called them home for supper. Or Breaking Bad is actually just a fanfic the students in Mr. White's class write about him because no one has any idea what he does with his free time, and the running jokes about it have gotten wildly out of hand. It works. It kind of works, doesn't it? Now, I remember reading that, when they started syndicating Laverne and Shirley outside of this country, for instance, in Singapore, back when they first started airing Laverne and Shirley in Singapore, two young women living out on their own was, culturally unthinkable. So they changed the premise, the opening credits. So that it said that that the story concept is that Laverne and Shirley were two escapees from a women's lunatic asylum who were living together who were hiding out together in the city. And I used to watch the show when I was a kid. I'm like, that premise works. It's just interesting concept. Now here's one. Now, imagine if the oceans were actually replaced by forests. And as you went, down, instead, as you walk from the quote-unquote shoreline, and the deeper you went, the forests, the deeper you went into the forest, the trees would get taller. The deeper you went, and bigger, and there'd be thousands of undiscovered species, and you'd walk across the bottom. You could effectively walk across the bottom of the ocean, but the deeper you went, the darker it would be, and the animals would get progressively scarier and bigger and more dangerous. And instead of like whales, there'd be like giant deer. It's just people stretching their. I'm afraid to touch some of these ideas. I'm afraid to touch some of these ideas because I think I'd spoil them. Or I would find myself running amok trying to do them. I've already got enough writing prompts. Thank you very much. my. Oh, goodness. Sinus is plugging up a little bit. Let's see, what am I looking for? Ah, here we go. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sure most modern art is a money laundering scam, yeah. I'm not surprised in the least at the idea. I'm not disagreeing with you. But I'm sure at the same time there are a bunch of people who are true believers out there who who think that modern art is transcendent of that modern art is somehow equivalent to the artistic transcendence of man or something, and they otherwise the scam wouldn't work. There's got to be some true believers somewhere. Mm. That's you know all those stories with the sea creature that has an island on its back. The problem with most of them is that they always show creatures that live in the depths of the ocean carrying something on its back, and I'm like, how were they on the surface long enough for something to grow there? And it's one thing is the World of Warcraft Mists of Pandaria. If you pick a Pandaren character, your character starts out on a giant moving island, and it turns out that the giant moving island is on the back of a gigantic sea turtle. And you actually have a point where you have to talk to the sea turtle, and figure out why it's been swimming so erratically lately. You find out that that it's been injured, and and so. But anyway, sea turtles don't live on the surface of the ocean. Things are going to get kind of rough the first time that sea turtle. Things are going to get kind of rough for the people of Pandaria the first time that turtle goes diving for a meal. Even if it's just a vegetarian, it's still got to dive down and find this, the seaweed and stuff. They're very, the surface of the ocean is not very heavily inhabited. Let's see here. I'm gonna switch over to slideshow for a little bit here. I was starting to do something and I forgot what it is I was doing. Lose track of your own brain, Okay, let me turn this on. I'm sure you've all seen this at some point or another. This particular comic from Control Alt Delete by Tim Buckley. It seems like everybody on the internet is making fun of it, has been for making fun of it for several years now. What it is this is one point, in this particular webcomic, the character's girlfriend has a miscarriage. One of those suddenly serious moments that cartoonists try for every now and then. We all try to do that. But for some reason, this particular dramatic moment has I don't understand people. It's generated all sorts of toxic hate from people. People mocking it, people making fun of it, people critiquing it, and the really sad thing, what's really terrible. This particular moment, it's based on something that happened to the writer in real life. He had a girlfriend. She got she got pregnant, and they then a few months later she miscarried, and that was they went through that tragedy, and then that was the end of their relationship. And so that's just got to be wonderful, isn't it? That's just wonderful. The guy literally spills his guts to the internet about one of the most tragic moments in his life, and every hater on the internet starts like vomiting up toxic bile at him for it. Apparently he's for some reason his comic strip is especially hated by certain groups for some reason. I don't follow it. I've never followed the strip. I've seen a few of the comics. There's the usual stupid. It's just the usual stupid gamer comic kind of thing. But apparently every self-anointed art sophistique on the internet is just got to rip this guy a new one for it. It's literally become an internet cliche, an internet meme. It's been mocked and parodied, and I'm like, imagine doing a post about like your brother or sister dying of cancer, or your kid committing suicide, and everybody on the internet decides to make fun of it. Like, people suck. People really, really suck. Sweet, merciful crap. Oh my. Okay, what can you say to that? What can you do about it? I've dealt with some people seriously hating on me too. I'm no stranger to the concept. And maybe some of the hate I get I deserve. And I can be a jackass and a hypocrite and everything under the sun. And for somebody who's supposed to be a professing Christian, I'm a terrible example. Even before I became a shut-in, I never attended church. I'd go months at a time without attending church, and eventually my legs, swelled up like balloons, and I stopped attending at all. They'd have to wheel me in an ambulance, and I don't feel like showing up wearing a hospital gown or a muumuu. Just so I can roll in and sit in the back pew of a church I'm not a member of anymore. I really need to, I don't know. Maybe I should, like maybe I should find a church, but write in, see about becoming a member and see about having them mail me recordings of the services or something. I don't know, or something. It's not good, you know, not good being alone. I've gotten too used to being all on my, all by my lonesome. Really, and it comes down to I really don't want other people, getting into my life, showing up at my front door and, hi, let's come in for a visitation and and seeing what a style I live in. Or I'm like a dog. I want to bury all the crap in my house. I don't want to have people around to scrutinize my life. It's probably the one thing I need the most. I remember years ago I was living on my own. I attended church services at this one church that was nearby, and just sat in the back, hi there, I'm just visiting, and they had me fill out a card. And the next thing you know, next thing I know, a couple of days later, I worked third shift, and they woke me up, and there I am in my, in my shorts and my wife beater tank top T-shirt, standing there blinking at them in the. Unfortunately, all I could think was go away. It's sort of an accepted we've Christian community, we've accepted as a given that it should somehow it's become the new normal. At what point did this become the normal thing to for church people to go out and spontaneously visit people who were strangers and try and fellowship with them? In any other circumstances that would be kind of disturbing, you know. Like, who are you and why are you visiting me at my home? And the whole excuse is that we're doing it because we're wanting to, show you the love of Jesus. And I'm like, I don't know. It's not one of those. When you're in the church, when you're in a church, it's one of those things you don't really question, because that's the way it's always been, until it happens to you, and you're the wayward backslider who isn't a proper member of any church, and they want to check up on you. And I'm like, did the New Testament church do this? Was this a normal thing with the apostles' time? I'm not necessarily criticizing it. I'm just wondering, is this new normal? Is this just a current cultural thing, or is it really a foundational thing? You know what I'm saying? We've been doing it this way for hundreds of years, and the church has existed for thousands of years, so? Big point right there, Kind of a less that, it's a less than subtle question. How much of our Christian practices, the things that we do, quote, pardon the joke, religiously, are really just, human tradition. And isn't that the thing that Jesus upbraided the Pharisees for? They had reached a point where their traditions and their lore was more important than what the actual scriptures of God said. Wasn't that what messed them up? If I think that if we had a church, appear, a Baptist church appear today in this world, suppose a new church opened up just down the street from here, and and if we had, and it did all the practices and traditions of a king, of a king. I said almost a King James. If a new church opened up and its practices and it practiced worship services the way they did in the New Testament, in the New Testament times, would we recognize it for what it is, or would we shun it as, these a bunch of flaky charismatic weirdos, What would they think? What would they think of our practices? What would the apostles? What would Jesus think? There's the real fundamental question. What would Jesus think of some of the things we consider normal Bible going church Christian behavior? Because because I'll say it, I'll admit it. I mean, I've been on both sides of it now. The visitation thing, for example. And when I was a young man, we'd go out with my father. Oh, we're doing, we're just doing a wonderful, Christian thing, going out and visiting the people in their homes, and seeing how they're doing, and fellowshipping with them, and all this, and then I had it done to me, and I wasn't exactly so copacetic about it. My feeling was, why are you visiting me? Why are you bothering me? I don't even know you. I attended your church service because I felt that I hadn't attended church in a long time, and I needed some fellowshipping with other Christians. But now you're following me home. What is this? Oh, and by the way, I work third shift. Thank you very much for showing up in the middle of the day. I didn't feel like I was being fellowshipped with. I felt like I was being stalked. Like these people wanted to assert authority over me, as a Christian. That's not a fair. That may not be fair. That's probably not fair at all of me. But that's I'm not saying it's true, and I'm not saying that it's fair of me to have felt that way, and or that it was a good thing to even think that way. But that's how I felt. I felt like I was being subjected to a high pressure sale, basically. And I've noticed, and over the years, I noticed that I've been a door-to-door salesman, and I've done door-to-door witnessing, and I notice that the techniques between the two aren't much different. The techniques and the advice and the things that they tell uh, new current converts about going door to door and everything else. And it's a little bit of a crisis of faith at some level for me. You know, because on some level you feel like, you know, doing it this particular way is something, you know, it's been ordained by heaven that you should visit, you know, that you should go to church on Sunday, have prayer services on Wednesday, and go door to door or visiting on Thursday or Tuesday or whatever day your church picks. And that, you know, you know, it's perfectly acceptable to show up uninvited at some stranger's house and try and get yourself invited in the front door. And, you know, it's part of me, you know, maybe I'm just not. Maybe I'm just a backslider who hasn't been in church in so long that, you know, I don't realize, you know, how far I've backslidden. Maybe I'm dead wrong, but, you know, it just, you know, the question crosses my mind. Is this the best way to be doing it? Is this the right way to be doing it? And there are so many things that we do regularly. You know, what did the Bible say about? You know, now, have you ever been to a prayer service? You've been to a Wednesday night prayer service. It's basically an excuse to get people back in the church one more extra day, you know, for one more extra sermon a week. Let's be honest. But, you know, the first half of the time spent there is spent, you know, in prayer. You know, and sometimes they all pray together, or sometimes the church divides up, and the ladies go over here and the men go over here, and you know, and they all make the prayer requests and they list off the prayers, and then everybody takes a turn praying, and it always seems to be a contest to see who can make the loudest and longest and most meandering prayer they possibly can. Until somebody, you know, until somebody falls asleep, dies, or runs out of air. You know, because apparently we're afraid that God didn't hear us the first time. And that's how every single church I've ever been to does it. And of course, you know, you know, some people do it more than others, but there was one deacon, every third word was God, Lord, Jesus, Lord. You know, he's like, oh, dear Lord, we come here together, Lord. Oh, Lord, Father, Jesus, Lord, we come here together. We want to come to you as a church and fellowship. Jesus, Almighty God, oh, Lord, Jesus, and seriously, just like that. And he would go on for 5 minutes, and it was bad because he had a teenage son. He was my friend. And one day he looked at me. He said, "You know, did you ever sit there and count?" He said, "I'm like, what?" He said, "Yeah, he went on so long this time. I found myself counting how many times he said each one." And I'm like, you know, 15 Lords, 17 Jesuses, and oh Lord God, oh Lord, Lord Jesus, Lord Jesus, Lord Jesus, sold American. But what does the Bible say about, you know, saying long prayers to be seen of other men? Say your prayers, you know, he told them to say your prayers in a closet so that you're not seen them in, you know, they have their reward. They come out there and they make these long prayers to be seen of other men. You know, there you go. But we've been doing it this way for but we've been doing it this way in this church ever since this church was founded. Uh-huh. Maybe I don't have any ground to I don't have any ground to speak. I probably don't have any ground to speak or to critique or criticize because I have not been in church in years. I have not attended a church service in years, literally, because there was stretch, we got further. Once I left my parents' house, my father was a pastor, and even before he was a pastor, we were a church family. We were there Sunday morning. They were there Sunday night. We were there Wednesday night. And if we had a special church get-together, we were there for that. And if we had visitation, we were there for that. And then when he became a pastor, it only became that much more. And then I went to church, Bible college for a year, and just screwed that up big time, financially speaking. And it was, there wasn't a day go by where you didn't have some sort of, get-together prayer, sermon, lesson, 2 or 3 times a day. I mean, no kidding, no lying, no exaggerating. Just, it was like they were terrified that we were going to lose our Jesus if we got out of their sight for 20 or 30 minutes, And... then I finally, after years of screwing up, I'd finally get out on my own. Whenever I'd finally get out on my own, I wouldn't have a church I'd be attending at. There was a stretch I was living out of town, and I would drive from South Charleston, West Virginia, all the way to Lincoln County, West Virginia, to attend church at least Sunday morning at my parents' church. But every time I moved out of the house and got out on my own, my attendance would just, I would not become, I would never find a church where I became a member, and my church attendance would just slack off to nothing. And I just flogged myself with guilt over it. But I'd never change, and I'd attend maybe once a month, if that. Then once every couple of months. I made a point of not going to holiday services, Christmas or Easter, because I've seen this pageant before. You know what I'm saying? You couldn't telegraph what what the sermon was going to be about any more clearly, and I used to be a little jackass about it too when I was, it was easy to be self-righteous about it when I was forced to go. When it was mandatory. I lived with my folks, and I had to go to church, so I didn't have any choice in the matter. I could be real self-righteous about it, and I would lecture other people that weren't attending church. Forsake not the assembling of yourselves together, it says, and well, there you have it. As soon as I was off the leash, I was just as bad as anybody else, or worse. I had all sorts of pretensions. And one of the things that I can never, one of the things I could never know, one of the things I just can't determine for myself, have I gotten wiser, or have I simply gotten more foolish? Have I wised up to have I become more sensible and more balanced, or am I just this terrible backslider? And my money's on the second, frankly. I know myself too well. It's reached a point where I say, my morning prayer, such as it is I thank you, Jesus, for this life you've given me. I'm sorry I haven't made better use of it. And God, have mercy on a sinner and a fool. Verbatim. So, what can I say to that? What can I say beyond that? God, have mercy on me, a sinner. The feeling when I get to heaven, I'm gonna look down at the wood, hay, and stubble of my life, and God only knows how long it'll be before my tears stop falling. I think the reason God keeps me alive is to keep me around as a bad example. There it is. I pray that God, Jesus, whatever happens, at least let me, before I die, let me do one good thing. Whatever it is, one good thing that will last beyond me, and will be to your glory. That's the prayer. That's the only prayer that I have left. I have no righteousness of my own. It's the grace of God through the blood of Jesus Christ. That's it. And my life every morning is a reminder of that, right there in the mirror. That's one of the things about the people who believe you can lose your salvation. Look, if you could lose it, you would, you know, because you're not good enough to, you're not good enough you can't be good enough to save yourself. So what makes you think you can possibly be good enough to keep yourself? Salvation's by grace. Salvation is a gift. There are three verses I remember. I couldn't state you the chapter or verse, but I notice it says, "Whosoever comes into me, him will I in no wise cast out. I will never leave thee nor forsake thee, and none shall take them out of my hand." What options does that leave for people who believe that you can lose salvation? that pretty much covers all the bases. You know what I'm saying? Hmm. No, I think I'll just stick to a simple wrench. I try and draw a monkey wrench now. I'm just going to be spending all day at it. Eh. Wrong tool. There we go. Tell you, there are some tools from my old art programs that I really miss sometimes when I'm doing this. I've been looking at some of the DC comics. I gotta say this. I don't want anything to do with them. I don't want anything to do with them. Let's see. It's beyond beyond the old iconic superheroes. Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman. These people have a serious hate on for Christianity. Have you seen some of the filth they produce? The Hellblazer comics, for one, and they're is just appalling. Uh, it's canonical in the DC universe that the Archangel Gabriel in their version of the Immaculate Conception, the angel Gabriel raped Mary and did it on God's orders. And that's one of the more charming and subtle blasphemous jabs at Christianity. Brings to mind that meme. He keeps bringing to mind that meme I've seen. It shows a picture of a cassette tape with a tape label on it. It says, "The King James Bible, as read in a condescending voice by as read by a condescending 14-year-old atheist." And that's basically how DC Comics in particular treats Christianity. Not even Marvel Comics. They got their stuff. It's just but DC, my word. People just got the devil in them, I swear. why these kids growing up, growing up with these hot topic atheists, these pubescent, adolescent, snot-nosed atheist attitudes. Or maybe we should call it anti-theist. I'm a little puzzled though with some of the atheists I do know personally. Well, not personally, on the internet here. I've had several of them openly state, that they're atheists, but they also openly admit that it's Christianity that has basically been the foundational force of modern Western civilization, and how do they possibly reconcile? They can't. They can't. It's got to be the most. Just hearing somebody say, "Okay, I'm an atheist, but I believe Christianity is has produce the morals and philosophies of Western civilization, and that it works better than anything else, but I don't believe in it." And the cognitive dissonance is just flabbergasting. I mean, yes, you call yourself an atheist, you don't believe, but someday you are going to have to, one way or another, you're going to have to reconcile your faith in the values of Western civilization and your rejection of the faith that created them. And there went the music again. Darn it. I'm not trying to pee in your cornflakes here, guys. You don't believe that the earth was created. You don't believe that the people of Israel were touched by God. You don't believe that Jesus was the son of God, and that he was of the Trinity, and that he was the sacrifice and payment for the sins of humanity. You don't believe any of the biblical record, but when confronted with it, you reluctantly admit that the values and morals of Christianity and of Judeo-Christian morals have been the working system, as evidenced by how Western civilization bloomed and thrived and basically become the foundation of modern civilization. And I'm sorry, you look at all you do a comparison. You look at other faiths and philosophies, even the ones that are fair, have certain moral similarities, and you can see where they ground to a halt. the farthest, I mean, you look at Buddhism, and the civilizations that were dominated by it, basically ground to a halt in the Dark Ages until they were contacted by Christianity. You look at Africa. My word, all you have to say. You look at the shamanism and animism and all the pagan religions, and you look at places like North and South America, and Central America, and Africa, and they just stalled out at the Stone Age. And not just technologically or scientifically, morally and ethically. It was Christendom that was the first it was Judaism and Christianity that were the first ones to question things like institutional slavery, to suggest this is one of the things about the Old Testament. People like to bash on the Old Testament laws. For instance, it does say in the Old Testament that parents could bring their child before the elders of the tribe and say, we can do nothing with this child. He is a monster. We cannot control him, and we condemn him. And the elders of the tribe would render a decision, and if they decided against the child would be stoned to death. And everybody, and the people who hear about that first time, oh, they stone children to death for being disobedient. Oh, what barbarians! Oh, there's your Christianity. Oh, there's your Jesus. Oh, there's your Jehovah. And they, ignorance. They're forgetting that in that day, there was no civilization on earth where that wasn't perfectly acceptable. Let me put it that worse was it perfectly acceptable. They weren't being given permission to kill their children. This was the first time anybody established that parents simply didn't have the right to dispose of their children. Every other civilization, every other culture, even the most advanced ones on earth, ancient Egypt, it was perfectly acceptable to take your child and sacrifice them to the gods. Or decide you didn't want to feed one of them and kick them off a cliff. Or just leave, decide that the kid was too ugly to live and abandon them out in an open field to die of exposure. Or of dingoes. Children weren't regarded as people. They were property. Less than property. If you stole property, you got in trouble. This was the first civilization to say, no, you can't do that. You want to end your child's life. First of all, both parents have to agree to it. Second of all, they have to bring the child before the elders of the tribes and see if their condemnation of that child has any validity. And that child had to be an absolute monster to be condemned. And it's notable that historically there is not a single, not once was this done, ever. The implication was straightforward, that you couldn't just treat people. They talk about, oh, they allowed slaves, and no, what they did is that they established laws for how slaves were to be treated. Slaves already existed. First of all, the Hebrew laws established you didn't make slaves, but slavery was bondservants. Actually, people would be sold into people would sell themselves or be sold into slavery to pay off a debt, and once they had worked that debt off, they were free again. And the Hebrew laws were the ones that established that they were to be slaves were not disposable either.
that they had rights, that they were protected, and that the slave owner was responsible for their well-being and safety and feeding and clothing and sheltering and medicine, and that if the slave owner raised a hand against them, the debt was forfeit. And furthermore, if a slave ran away from their master, the people were not to chase the slave down and give him back. De facto proof. They ran away. It was considered de facto proof that the master was a poor master. The conditions laid down in Hebrew law for being a bondservant were better than most so-called free men get today as an employee of a company. Guaranteed food, clothing, shelter, employment for a guaranteed number of years, and an opportunity to renew for life, if they so wished. Protections against abuse of any sort for both men and women. Everything they criticize, these were the first times that anybody noted them down as something that needed legal consideration. Now, the thing of it is that, think about this. This civilization, this culture, the Hebrews were slaves to the Egyptians just a few short years before, just a couple of years before before they established these laws as their practice. So by all rights, the people of Israel should have been imitating their former masters, and this is an established truth. What they don't like to talk about the slaves and the Underground Railroad and the Civil War and all that is that most of the slaves who ran away from their masters, prior to the Civil War in the United States, the first thing they did once they got north and were free men, they went out and bought slaves of their own, because that was what it was perfectly normal, even by their standard. Even the slaves were emulating the master. You take a civil, for hundreds of years the Hebrews had been under the boot heel of the Egyptians, the sandal heel, whatever. So by all rights, their culture should have emulated the Egyptians at just about every point, in how they treated women, how they treated children, how they treated slaves, how they, their sanitation practices. Consider this: the Hebrew people, just out of the blue, invented an entire system of hygiene, washing of hands, cleaning of clothing and dishes, quarantining of unclean things for a given amount of time. That was the purpose. That's when they declared something unclean, they weren't saying it was evil. They were saying it was unclean, literally, and that it wasn't to be touched by other hands until a certain period of time had passed. It was quarantine to prevent the spread of disease, and this thousands of years before anybody discovered so much as a germ. And all this knowledge, all this advance, literally just out of nowhere, out of the sky, literally, falls on the Hebrew people. They invented the concept of sanitation and cleanliness at a time when the most advanced civilization on earth, Egypt, their most learned people believed that the best way to bandage an open, festering wound was to smear donkey poo on it. And no, I'm not making that up. So ask yourself, where did this knowledge come from? They couldn't have learned it by trial and error, even as long as they were wandering out in the wilderness. Even in 40 years, they couldn't have learned this by trial and error. They would have been wiped out. One plague, whoops, let's try washing our hands with water and soap next time. So out of the blue, the Hebrew people, a bunch of slaves, no training, no education in the ways of war or agriculture or anything else. Slaves go out and build not only the most successful, an incredible, successful, thriving civilization, but a faith and a moral philosophy that has literally been the salvation of the world. Centuries ahead of anybody else discovering, they were like I said, they were practicing things like hygiene, centuries, thousands of years literally before anybody else even believed in it. But you, the atheist, do not want to believe that there was any divine inspiration involved. By all rights, if Christianity had been a lie, Christianity would have not existed. Think about that. As the joke goes, newsflash, Easter's been canceled. They found the body. Think about that. Whether you believe the word for word accounting of the crucifixion, burial, and the resurrection in the Bible is very simply and obvious. It is commonly known. The purpose of his execution was to bring an end to his enemies. Were trying to bring an end to his cult following. Their whole purpose for killing him and confiscating him and burying the body and putting guards on it was that they were planning. It was commonly known that he claimed that he would come back to life. They were going to wait 3 days, drag the body out, and show everybody he was a liar. That was the whole point. If Jesus had lied, Christianity would have died 3 days after he did. And yet instead it thrived. Despite Christianity, the claims of Christianity were subjected to the acid test and passed. And its enemies have been striving to destroy it ever since, and everything they have done, it has only grown stronger. Any other faith, any other religion would have imploded. And thousands of religions have, over the course of human history, have ended up on the ash heap of history. Under pressures not even 1/10 as severe. The survival of Christianity is its strongest claim to validity. And consider this. There are people that claim that the apostles got together and formed a conspiracy, and tried to pass Jesus, they came together and they formed a conspiracy, and then, they all decided to lie and say, Jesus came back, he was alive, we saw him, All but, I believe, two of them, all but two of the apostles, and I'm not counting Judas either, I'm talking all the apostles, all but two of them died under torture, torn apart by animals, crucified, beaten to death. Just the list of how they died is just horrific. People will lie. People will lie. And stick to a lie if they believe that lie benefits them. Claiming that Jesus was the Son of God and that he raised from the dead did nothing for them. It didn't get them women. It didn't get them women. It didn't get them money. It didn't get them fame and fortune and glory. What it got them was horrible persecution and a slow, brutal, horrible, lingering death. To proclaim the faith of Jesus, you got televangelists nowadays. You get fat and rich off the name of Jesus, and God between them and us, God's judgment between them and us on that matter. But back then, there was no percentage in it, and all they had to do to end their suffering was to renounce Jesus, burn a pinch of incense to Caesar, and walk out the door. But these men, all of them, died proclaiming the truth of Christ's resurrection. They died pleading, this is the truth. We have seen it. We saw it happen. Believe us. Turn to Jesus. It's the truth. That's not something the old joke is, two people can keep a secret if one of them is dead. But a dozen men keeping the most outrageous lie in all of history, and not one of them broke. Consider how many conspiracies and frauds have exploded just due to one of them slipping up. Consider there was how many people involved in the Watergate scandal? Like 3? And up she goes, The gospel of Jesus Christ didn't bring them wealth, riches, fame, or anything on this earth worth desiring. It brought them nothing but pain and suffering. But they died fervently, proclaiming over and over again that they were eyewitnesses to it, and that it was the truth, and it was the salvation of the world. So atheist who witnesses that even the simple morals and ethics of Christianity have buoyed up an entire civilization for thousands of years. That witness the benefits, the peripheral benefits of this faith to society as a whole. Who know these things, you're going to have to reconcile. You're going to have to come down. You're going to have to admit that believing that the universe is one big accident does not dovetail with the evidence. This is what we have to come to. This is my plea to you. Consider the possibility that all these smug atheists and evolutionists that cling to the idea that their very existence is an accident, can just contemplate the concept that they might be wrong. If I'm wrong, I've lost nothing. And I have at least gained a meaningful life. But really, it's here you have it. Everybody clings to Darwin, as if he was the one truth, as if everything he had to say was proven forever. Look, do you realize that it's been over 100 years? They should have disproven him by now. We did. You just ignored it. But just because the scientific community has believed something for a few decades doesn't mean it's automatically true. For twice the amount of time that they've been preaching the gospel of Darwin, they used to believe in phlogiston, and they believed in ether. The idea that there was this substance that, that since light was made of waves, that the waves had to be in some sort of substance. Like waves of water are in, ocean waves are waves in water. Therefore, the light waves are waves in ether, and they disproved that. And but it was considered scientific gospel truth for centuries. And I could go down the list for hours of things that the self-educated, the self-anointed believed. They absolutely positively knew for certain that they were scientifically correct. And then they found out just how horribly wrong they were. And this is one of the concepts behind the probability bomb. The idea that evolution is not, it's interesting how they always assume that, every sci-fi TV series assumes that everybody accepts evolution as a given in the future. That all the civilizations and cultures and alien races, they've all come to the conclusion, of course evolution's true, it's science, but blah, 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 blah. And they forget that that what we call, absolute scientific truth has become a laughable joke just a few decades later. And they never consider the possibility that maybe the more advanced alien races would look on Darwinism as a quaint, ignorant, and possibly laughable superstition. Unthinkable. Well, I submit to you, my personal idea is that no civilization would last long enough to reach the stars that continually rejected intelligent design. No, where do you get off saying that? Because, among other things, intelligent design assumes an intelligent designer, and that believes that there is a pattern and a logic and a reason and a structure to everything, including to intelligence, to morals, ethics, and philosophy. A civilization that adamantly believes that it arose by accident from random chemical reactions. That's a nihilistic society. That's going to become eventually a nihilistic civilization. And it's not what you call a sustainable culture. And you get already, I can hear people say, "You're saying that atheists can't, you're saying that atheists can't be moral." Oh, I'm sure that a person who claims to be an atheist can behave morally and act morally and have ethics and values. I'm just saying that they're going to be struck by cognitive dissonance when it comes to the fundamental realities of their beliefs. Look, you can't simultaneously believe in universal truths, in self-evident universal truths, and in the idea of subjective morality, and the idea that right and wrong are simply concepts that we evolve over time, depending on the circumstances. You can't believe that you're nothing more than a naked ape and not end up espousing the idea that we are free to behave like naked apes. You tell children that as many people pointed out, they go out and they spend millions of dollars telling children in schools that they're nothing but animals, and they're astonished when they act like them. What a shocker, If there is no God, then there is no final authority. The final moral authority is whichever human has the biggest stick. And can force everybody else to play the way he says. That's not cynicism, that's inevitability. That's what, that's, atheism, Darwinism, humanism. It's the idea that humanity, we determine our own fate, we decide, that sounds great on the surface, but the problem, what it boils down to, what it functionally means is that we are, it's the belief that humanity is only answerable to the morals and ethics that it wants to be to. Guess how long that works? As one author observed, one fellow by the name of Box Day observed, yes, atheists and evolutionists, which is a redundancy right there. You're not gonna find an evolutionist who isn't an atheist. Well, you're not gonna find an atheist who isn't an evolutionist. They're Christian evolutionists, so called, but yeah. Just talk about mutually exclusive beliefs, but atheism requires fundamentally the belief that the universe is a gigantic accident, and it's not under the control of any intelligence or design. An atheist, a person can claim to be an atheist and still behave morally, but that's not because of their, there is no foundation in atheism for a moral structure. Atheism fundamentally says that humanity is the current, top of the pyramid, and that what we say goes, and that morality is simply a matter of who has the most fists or the most guns or the most votes, which still comes down to whoever has the most fists and most guns to enforce what the votes say. And as Vox Day was observing, yes, you'll find very moral atheists in Western civilization, but you'll notice he noted that ethically, now you take a Christian in a Muslim society will have Christian values. A Christian in a Buddhist society will have Christian values. A Christian in a secular society will have Christian values. Those Christians scattered across the globe will have more in common with each other than the society in which they are immersed, at least in the most fundamental moral and ethical issues. On the other hand, you take an atheist from America, an atheist from Saudi Arabia, an atheist from India, and they will have more, and each of those will have more in common ethically and morally and culturally than with their own immersed society than they will with each other. And furthermore, we've seen what happens so long as you keep an atheist immersed in a society with an ethical or moral foundation. They will behave morally and ethically. But we've also seen historically what happens when atheists ascend to the top of the ziggurat. This is, we saw what happened in the French Revolution. The French Revolution was the first hurrah of secular humanism. Their goal, when they were on the full tear, their goal was to destroy everything of the old ways, including every last trace of the church or of Christianity in general, and particularly of the Catholic Church, because that was the most dominant one in that region. But they were going to wipe out all religion, all past culture, and everything else. And as the slogan was, they were going to strangle the last king with the entrails of the last priest. And what you ended up with was a society that literally began devouring itself. The Soviet Union, Communist China, Nazi National Socialist Germany. Every one of them, their government philosophy, their philosophy was atheism and secular humanism. And they were the biggest bloodbaths in human history. They slaughtered millions of their own people. In fact, it's arguable that they killed more of their own people than they did of any enemy nation. They threw out God, and what a surprise! Their nations turned into literal hell on earth. That's one of the things I've suspected for a long time, is that hell, the real literal material hell, is actually just what happens to the universe when God completely withdraws his presence. And I base that on the fact we see what happens when God is taken out of a place. It doesn't take very long at all for it to become something unspeakable and brutal. Literal hell. It becomes hell on earth. And consequently, I've often suspected that God didn't so much build hell as he simply withdrew his presence from a part of the universe. And literally speaking, this is ironically, this is what the people who reject God want. They want a universe without God, and God gives it to them. That's just my philosophical meanderings. So don't take it as gospel truth. But it sort of fits. I remember wasn't too long after when these school shootings first started. This one little cynical letter started going around. It said, you're supposed to be some kid writing, "Dear Jesus, where were you? Where was your Jesus when this psycho was shooting up my school?" And some smart aleck wrote back, "Dear student, sorry, I'm not allowed in school anymore." They got what they wanted. They wanted a godless, they wanted a school without God. And what do they got? A godless school. What a surprise. I wonder what the connection could possibly be. Of course, I pointed out this fact too. We make when it comes to the state of the schools. Come on, what were you thinking? Uh, you know, everybody talking about school issues, school lunches and extracurricular activities, and school this and school that, and nobody's going, why the hell are we turning our children over to the government to be educated in the first place? This is a question everybody stopped asking far too long ago. Really, think about it. Think about it. Same old saying, we send our children to Rome. We send our children to Caesar, and then we are astonished when they march home as Romans. Pardon. it's the same old stupidity over and over and over again. What can you do? But nobody's listening. Nobody's listening anymore. See, this is why this is why this is why survivalists have started have started gaining so much popularity because people are tired of trying to fight the, they're tired of trying to fight the trend, and have started just getting ready to run for the hills. And I've said it myself. The more I see of how the world's going, the more I understand Jonah. I remember hearing about the story of Jonah and how he he had to be forced to go preach at Nineveh. And after he was done, he went up on a hill and sat there, and he was he all but had a bucket of popcorn, waiting to see the end. And he got mad when it didn't happen. And the usual response, oh, what a mean old man, As I've gotten older, I've started to see it more from his perspective. You got to understand, these people had to be absolutely vile. They had to be just outright wicked, horrible people. Read some of the descriptions of how depraved some of these societies got over time, and it had to be absolutely infuriating. Can you think of anything absolutely more infuriating than you've seen somebody who lives an absolutely vile, wicked, horrible, nasty, evil life, and they never ever pay for it? That's human nature. Is that we want to see some retribution. Dumb as we are, we forget that we have a little retribution coming our own way. But still, it's human. I remember one of the things that made me so angry about Ted Kennedy. You remember me talking about Ted Kennedy. I mean, that son of a beep. He was basically an accessory to murder, if not an outright murderer himself. Chappaquiddick, man. Innocent woman died. And he spent the rest, and how did he pay for it? He didn't spend a minute he did not spend a minute in a jail cell. He spent the rest of his life farting through silk boxers. He died as one of the most powerful men in America. and he spent his he's every minute he spent after Chapel, he just basically he despoiled this country to boot. He was a wicked, horrible man. And he never spent a moment in jail and didn't pay a penny in fines, and got away with things that the rest of us would have been incarcerated for life for. And just infuriating, sickening. Now imagine an entire ancient city full of people that decadent and depraved. That was what Jonah didn't want these people to repent. He wanted them. He wanted to see them get what reap what they'd sowed. And you had to figure that more than likely, people like him and other Israelis had been victims of these wretched people. Because people who depraved people aren't happy unless they're spilling misery out on others. This is why leftists and liberals and are so determined to stick their meat hooks into other people's lives. Because they're not, they're not fulfilled unless they're, they can't just go off and rot themselves to death. They've got to drag everybody else along that they can with them. It's not enough for them to go off and live a depraved, pervert life. They have to punish anybody else that tried to impede them in the past, AKA make me a cake, bitch. This is why the goal of some of the most evil people is subjugate the rest of the world. Wickedness isn't happy, and wickedness can indulge in every decadence it possibly can, but it's not happy unless it's making somebody else miserable too. So you got to figure that that Jonah was up there preaching to people, not only he figured would never listen to him, but who had probably, he'd spent decades, just years, being offended, revolted, and even probably persecuted by them. And let's face it, we're all, whether it's hypocrisy or not, we all get angry when we see wicked people who never seem to pay the price. Of course, because in the back of our mind, we know that if we had gotten that far off the rails, we wouldn't have, the boom would have fallen on us in no time flat. But when it comes down to it, he'd probably spent his life preaching and imploring and proselytizing and telling people just like this, stop what you're doing, and having them turn their nose up at him, and just continuing doing whatever they darn well pleased. And he was probably well past the point where he was sick of it all. And there are days where I get just so sick of our society the way it is. It's just so vile, so depraved, so nasty. We're expected to live with it. We're expected to live with it surrounding us, and we're expected biblically we're expected to go out and go constantly row upstream against the current in Crap Creek. And some days there's nothing more than you want to do than find yourself a nice tall mountain, climb up on it, get out your popcorn and your lawn chair, and sit there and watch and wait for God to start raining fire and brimstone on the city below. And then you stand there and you watch as they, as the clock ticks down and nothing happens. Imagine how the people in North Korea feel. When the despot that had been making their lives a living hell finally died, and his son just stepped right into his shoes. And the frustration realizing that nothing ever changes. I can't imagine the despair they must have felt. Here comes the new tyrant, same as the old tyrant. And I've heard some of the people, refugees, people who escaped North Korea. It was just tragic. It was one of these. You've seen some of these videos. Kids try food from South Africa, or Irishmen try American cheeseburgers and stuff like this. When they did one where they had North Koreans try American barbecue. And these were expatriate North Koreans who they'd escaped to South Korea. And apparently there is a barbecue place opened in South Korea. It's an all-American barbecue place. They opened, they're franchised out there. And they sat these people down and introduced them to American barbecue. And you're watching those people's eyes just light up as they taste it. It was extraordinary. It was like Christmas morning, but it was so sad. It was so sad because they would start talking. They would talk about and they would say this much meat would be for a family of 12. They'd be putting it in one little plate, and they describe it, and the only meat they had, you go to prison for butchering a cow because cows were work animals, and in these farming communities up in North Korea, they'll have a couple of cows that they use to plow the fields, and they will literally work those cows to death. And then after the cows, just so old they can't work on it, and they butcher them, and those, pathetic, each household will get maybe a fourth of a pound of meat. This stringy meat, and it's appalling to hear, just the hellish conditions. And the things we take for granted, just the simple things just don't exist for them. And I remember Kim Jong Un. I thought Kim Jong Il. What was the first guy's name? Kim Jong Il, Kim Jong Un. I used to call him the amazing Chia dictator. That little fat little. That little runty little shrimp with a hair sticking straight up in the middle of the air. And I'm like, oh, Lord, And you know why they do that, why they look like that. Why both him and his son look like absolute idiots. Like they can't come. Who's going to tell him? You've got this dictator who he gets mad at somebody, he'll feed them to wild pigs to make him an example. Just because he's annoyed at them. And who's gonna step up and say, "Sir, your hair looks like you lost an extra chromosome or something." Who's gonna tell him? Did you know that they have a book? They are only allowed to have certain hairstyles. Everybody has to have a radio. Everybody has a radio. It's only to tune to one channel for the government. It's 1984. It's Big Brother. It's horrible. And we have tolerated the existence of this third world Asian shithole. Torturing its helpless millions for decades. Why? Because during the Korean War, we didn't want to finish the job. We pushed him back to the 38th parallel, and let's go home. And we left a nation to rot to death. Under communism, and then into a communist dictatorship, and then into this insane hellhole. I don't know what it is. It's like You never hear of a dictator or a tyrant who isn't absolutely batshit insane. You ever notice that? I love these armchair philosophers. The dictatorship would actually be the most efficient form of government. And then you go out and look at the actual dictators and you know, pants on the head crazy. And you're like, uh-huh. Tell me again about the rabbits, Uncle George. It's like, go straight to crazy dictator. Do not stop. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. For thousands of years, supposedly, you had relatively sane, quote unquote, tyrants, absolute rulers, monarchs, kings. But anymore, they just, you know. That doesn't quite look right, does it? Here, let's see. Of course, non-dictatorships aren't doing too much better on the non-crazy front. Consider the German government. Their prime minister, or whatever the hell her governmental role is, her country's literally being invaded by Islamic homicidal lunatics, and her response is to say, "Throw the doors open wider. We need to be more welcoming." And everybody's looking at me and going, "Yeah, well, let's talk about how crazy Trump is." Let's talk. I'll admit that Trump doesn't exactly pass as normal, but he's crazy like if he's crazy like a fox. So, what can you say? I kind of wonder if he doesn't act that way because he figures that if he acted like a normal human being, nobody would, if he acted completely normal, none of them would pay attention to him or listen to him. Yeah. Okay, let me switch this over here. I didn't realize I didn't have the display capture on. There we go. And let y'all take a look at. Let's see here. Let's see what it's saying here. Just live dashboard. Yeah. It's pretty self-evident that most people, pretty much every atheist, pretty much every Western atheist has picked atheism not because they've been persuaded of the scientific or truth of it, but because just because they viscerally hate Christianity that much. That old fuddy-duddy Jew on a stick keeps ruining all their fun. And the liberal love affair with Islam, is anything but Christianity. That's what all it comes down to. And they're ignorant enough to think that a Islamic society would let them behave as however they wished. I will note for you here. Consider, for example, this. Let's take an example. The sexual revolution. Now, I want to submit to you a supposition that the so-called liberated philosophies always end up being more oppressive than supposedly oppressive Christianity. Which they are always, fighting the system and opposing the tyranny of Christianity, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Take, for example, the sexual revolution. As one woman put it, one of these much disparaged people who go around teaching abstinence first in their sex ed program. And no, it's not abstinence only. They're just pointing out abstinence first because abstinence actually, works. Every other sex ed program is built around the idea of let's show them how to fuck and get away with it. How can we keep being as stupid and immoral and irresponsible as we've always been and still get away with it? But this one woman, she pointed out, she would have these seminars, and she would ask kids, what's the one, she'd ask kids, do you have any, and she'd ask the groups of girls she'd be talking to, she said, do you have any questions? Do you have any questions? And she said the most frequent question she got from dozens of girls from all over the United States, they kept asking, how can we say no to sex without losing the boy? Or just generally, how do we, how can we say no to sex? Before the sexual revolution, it was assumed. It was assumed that the girl was not, going to put out. And, that was the default assumption. And she pointed out what the sexual revolution has done has taken away the girl's moral and moral authority to say no. We've spent decades telling you, there's nothing wrong with having sex outside of marriage. There's nothing wrong with having premarital sex. There's nothing wrong with having teenage sex. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't be so judgmental. And so this girl who does not want to have sex, who does not want to risk getting a venereal disease or getting a pelvic infection or any of the other thousands of things beyond pregnancy that can come with sexual activity, she says, how can I say no? Because if I say no, I'm being prudish. If I say no, I'm being frigid. If I say no, and if I say I don't want to have sex because of my morals, then I'm being judgmental. And these girls, the moral authority to say no has been taken away from them. And to say nothing, it was always, it's always been that that men who did not, lose their virginity at a certain age were always looked down on by society. It's just one of the failures of human morality. But in a Christian society, in a sexually conservative Judeo-Christian society, a young man could say no. I'm waiting for marriage, and they had moral authority to say it. And they were not looked down on it for saying it, except by stupid people. Nowadays, Christianity is laughed at. Christian sexual morals are laughed at. All these people sitting around with syphilis sores all over their face, laughing at the people who are doing the smart thing. And what's worse, the sexual revolution, we all lost that particular war. Consider, it used to be that a teacher could, give one of their students a hug, or comfort a crying child, or any one of a number of things. But nowadays, because we have become such a sexualized society, even the most innocent gestures are interpreted sexually. Approaching a young woman to have a conversation with her at the workplace. Are you going to sexually harass me? Well, no, I just wanted to talk to you. And on and on and on and on and on. Society, the society that's thrown itself into the sexual revolution, everything has been sexualized. and everybody's been smeared. And consider the dating scene. The dating scene used to be, a guy could take a girl, how about a kiss, a little kiss and then good night, But if they went further, that was their responsibility. That was their responsibility. That was their problem. That was their business. But in the sexual, after the sexual revolution, what have we got? A man approaching a woman literally has to walk through a minefield. A legal minefield. All the woman has to do is make an accusation, and she can destroy his life. All he has to do is be in too close a proximity, and she can accuse him of just about anything. They've reached a point where you have to, it was bad enough when you had to sign a prenup to get married. Now they got people out there that have to sign a pre-coitus agreement. Or they're taking their lives into their own hands going into the girl's bedroom. Think about that one. Back in the frigid, oppressive days of before the sexual revolution, the girl could be regarded as being safe. The young man could be expected to be a gentleman, or at least to more or less behave himself, and nobody assumed all these horrible things, and you didn't need a court lawyer to hold a girl's hand. But now this is what we've got. The sexual revolution has turned the dating scene into a banana republic. Where one misstep can get you shunted off to the gulag. And of course, there's no equality in the sexual revolution. This was supposed to liberate men and women. Instead, it gave women license to make life absolute hell for even a completely innocent man. Kind of afraid to poke at it anymore. Don't want to. If I poke at it anymore, I'm going to start messing it up. Try and get, I could try and put more, heavier detail around in the back here, but if I do, I'm risking muddying it up. think I'll stop there. And that's if he wants more details, I'll poke it a little more, but I'm gonna call it quitteroos with that, and now to email it out to him. Something on my teeth. Ugh. Need to brush more often, I think. Oh, I learned some things. Learned some interesting things. You can broil a steak in a toaster oven. A nice steak. Throw it on there. 10 minutes. Just throw some foil in there. Throw the steak in there. Set it on broil. Set it for 10 minutes, and it's done. You can charcoal it in 20. Sort of overshot the mark, and first couple of times I tried it was extremely well done, but yeah, I'm still trying for rare steak, but well, you can only do that in a skillet, and I only have one of those little electric burners that you plug in. Those things are crap. Let me tell you, it's absolute crap. You plug them in, you turn them on, you're cooking, and the thing will shut down. They all have little thermostats in them. They're supposed to keep the heat level. Instead, what it does is it shuts off, and then lets the skillet get ice cold again. And you wait and you wait and you wait. Oh yeah, let's turn the heat back on, and it'll take you 30 minutes to fry an egg. And you're like, why for you do this to me? All you want is a fried egg, Try and make some bacon in that, man. It just turns out nasty. There we go. There we go. Let's just turn this on. Turn this on. There we go. All right. Oh, beg your pardon. Oh, just nasty. I've been tinkering around with another fan fiction idea. There was one fan fiction challenge. Basically, I've seen 2 or 3 variations of it. The idea is you insert a character into the DC universe with and you give a couple of different types of power, and then and see where you go from there. I've seen one where the inserted character was a genie, another where it was an orange lantern, a green lantern with an orange ring, and another where it was a rabbit, one of the rabbit women from Final Fantasy, except she was a teal lantern, which, according to the author's canon, was the color of joy. And it's all just basically they open up the same way. The character wakes up and for some reason they're out in the middle of space orbiting the Earth. They freak out. They figure out that they have powers, and then they and then they realize that it's not the Earth they came from. And I've been tempted to stick my finger into that one too. But a couple of things on it. First of all, I've already got a huge plate full of stuff to work on. And second of all, frankly, I told you about some of the things I found out about the DC universe, and it's just slathered with just outright vulgar and vile anti-Christian sentiment. There's all sorts of occultic crap. Man, you're sitting there, you're reading what you think are some Justice League comics, and then one of the magic using characters pops up, and suddenly you're over in Hellblazer, watching as John Constantine describes how he used a chainsaw to cut off the wings off of Gabriel, the angel, and how, going on to describe how Gabriel was the rapist who raped Mary Magdalene to sire the baby Jesus, and just nun killing nastiness, And you're like, what the heck happened to the people that brought you, Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman? What the heck happened here? Turned into some truly awful people. That's all you can say. Yeah, and another thing is that the idea I'm toying with, I could probably ignore most of the fringe crap and just stick with the mainstream DC, Justice League universe. But the idea I had is incredibly similar, I realized, to the Warcrafter. My idea is that my protagonist would be a lantern, one of the like the Green Lantern except with a different color, and his ring would be another minor color. It'd be the color of humor. And he would be, and his species would be changed to that of a coyote, with the idea being is that thousands of years ago, one of his ancestors stopped by on planet Earth, slummed out with the natives, showed them how to grow corn and pulled a few pranks, and then left. Yeah, you see where I'm going with that. And he's been selected to be a Green Lantern of Sector 2814. He's a turquoise lantern, the color of humor. And I'm just basically going to see if he can drive Batman completely insane. But I'm like, no, we're already doing this. We're already doing this with Bayleaf in the Warcrafter and Armsmaster. So, no. Is that music too loud? Hey, wild, 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 hey, wild, wild weasel. It's wild, wild weasel. It's wild, wild weasel. Hello, wild, wild weasel. You can't hear music? This is the music too loud. Can you hear the music now? How about now? How about now? No, 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 no. You can't hear the music? We got problems. Desktop audio. Let me check the sound thingies. Has there been no music playing this entire time? Son of a biscuit eater. There is no music. Let's see here. It says sound. I'm listening to music. Logitech USB. Properties. There, how's that? Full frontal rough? What the heck are you talking about? Okay, I'll turn it up a little bit. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3, testing. Dun 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 dun. Whatever. Well, doggone it. It must have reset something. Normally there's no problem. I started up, the desktop audio is going fine. So zippity doo dah. Wild Wild Weed. Darn you and your name. I finished up the last drawing and sent it out to you. The background's kind of really uber simplistic, but I was kind of afraid of overdoing it, of over scribbling it, and I didn't want to mess with it. But I sent it out to you, and I also fiddled a bit with the leg on the bear kangaroo. Weasel W. Let's call him W. I'm not gonna eat no broccoli. Not gonna eat no Brussels sprouts. I'm president of the United States. You can't make me do it now. I am Weasel. I are baboon. I still can't get over the fact they had Worf voicing the Weasel. I didn't like that cartoon. I don't like a lot of the cartoons of that era. This is because it's deliberately ugly. Okay, it was bad enough when it was just Ren and Stimpy, and I'm like, eh. But every other cartoonist since then is, every other animator since then is, let's make it gross and badly animated, and we'll call it hip. And all the stoners at college will get, bombed out of their minds and watch it and make us famous. Ah, good. The Bear-Roo looks better. I figured it out. I forgot to give him an ankle. I was like, wait a minute. Oh, there it is. Yeah. All right. Good news, folks. We're just shy the fundraiser. The GoFundMe I've got going is at it's just about $20 below $2,000. It's just under $2,000. Let's just say that. So it's that's 2,000 is 1/5 of my big goal. 1/5 of my goal. And for those who don't know, the whole thing is that I'm trying to. I got hit by my landlord. It says, you owe $5,000 in back rent. You missed quite a few over the past 10 years. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And, yeah. And between that and between the taxes I have been paying to the IRS over the past 5 years, basically I need close to 10 grand just to break even. As it is, I'm going to have to try and set aside a sizable chunk of the final GoFundMe just to pay the taxes. So, for this year, I don't want to start. If by God's grace I actually manage to raise enough to pay the IRS and my landlord completely off. I do not want to start this vicious cycle again. So I want to break free of that. I've got to break free. But you get the. Now it says something about mature. I'm looking at a poster right now. It's got all the comparative sizes of like every sci-fi spaceship ever. All the way from X-Wing fighters all the way up to the big giant planet eaters. And it says something about my, you're growing older. When you're really young, you're like, ooh, an X-Wing fighter. And as you get older, you go, I think I'd like one of those big, comfortable ships with a nice, big, roomy, great, big, nice, roomy, spacious and comfortable everything. Allegedly, 2.5 million people want to move to Canada because Trump won. And I'm like, leave. And Canada's going, we don't want them. The sort of people that leave the country, that would leave the country because of President Trump being elected, are the kind of people that nobody no country in their right mind wants packing out their country with. They don't want them. I liked how at the end of you remember the movie Up? He went from, I liked how at the end of the movie he had upgraded from having a house with toy balloons, and now by the end of it he now has a full-sized mansion equipped Zeppelin. I'm like, upgrade, rock on. But let's see here. Excuse me. Lungs are a little chunky. Oh my, oh my, oh my. Oh my. I'm aching. Of course, you have the maintenance issues for a Zeppelin, but yeah. Like Darby O'Gill and the Little People put, and the Little People, Darby O'Gill put it, he said, "What would you wish for?" "Oh, I'd wish for a big mansion on the hill." And he said, "But how would you pay for it? How would you keep it warm? How would you, keep it warm and clean and everything else?" And I go, "Oh yeah, good point." It's kind of sad. It's kind of sad. You think about it. The guy went completely crazy and over something so petty. And what was really stupid is that after all these years, all the things, he had dozens of, this guy is supposed to have had hundreds of creatures that he brought in, exotic animals that he'd brought in. He was a world famous explorer and animal hunter, and he had brought in all these trophies from all over the world. And suddenly he brings in a new trophy, and everybody accuses him of being a fake. It's just a big bird, but everybody else thinks it's, I'm like, what a time to suddenly get skeptical. Up was kind of a rough movie, because all of it was bittersweet, very bittersweet. Still a very great movie, but kind of a downer if you were looking to just real get get a good laugh and cheer yourself up. Well, actually, Zeppelins start off with, it wasn't that, they weren't very explosive to begin with. Considering that it was only two major accidents in all that time, the Hindenburg and one other. And most of the people got out of the Hindenburg safely. Secondly, it was not the helium, it was not the hydrogen that exploded. I hate it when they do this. They make this music and they push the volume control all over the dang place. But anyway, the Hindenburg exploded because the waterproofing they used on the envelope was actually had the same formula as, well, rocket fuel. It was aluminum oxide. Incredibly flammable if you had the right igniting force, and a lightning bolt was just the thing. It was coming in for a landing, and it struck by lightning, and that set it off. And supposedly the Germans pushed the idea that it was the hydrogen that was the danger, because they wanted, they realized what they had there. They have just discovered a new rocket fuel. And they wanted to cover it up because they wanted to use it in their V2 rockets. So they pushed the idea that the Hindenburg was, that the Hindenburg went up because the hydrogen caught fire. I'm itchy. Itch. And, well, really, with modern technology, making a Zeppelin, even one filled with hydrogen, to be fairly safe would be pretty easy, really. We'd be able to make them lighter, stronger, safer, more fuel efficient. Wild. Okay, W. Whatever you want, just send it in. Oh. Oh my. Well, I'm fairly sure that, yeah, like RH Vet said, I'm pretty sure that the hydrogen didn't help. But, all things considered, I mean, it wasn't, the Zeppelin's been flying for how long? For how many decades? And only two major two major incidents? Now, how many airplanes have we had plummet out of the sky in the same amount of time? Using modern technology and modern materials, we could bring back the Zeppelin. We could, it could revolutionize transportation and and international shipping again. Those bookers could haul. Do you know those things could hit up to 100 miles an hour? I didn't know that. Close to 100 miles. Well, 81 miles an hour, doggone. And considering they could go in a straight line, they didn't have to worry about roads. Anyway, there you have it. Of course, good ideas are, there's... I hate to say it, there are forces out there that align to suppress good ideas. Dyson, the guy that invented, that vacuum cleaner, the Cyclone vacuum cleaner, the Dyson vacuum cleaner. He tried to market it to vacuum cleaner manufacturers first. None of them wanted it. So he went out, started his own company, started selling them. And years later, one of the guys he had spoken to come back to him and said, if we had known you were going to go ahead and go into business, we would have just bought it from you, bought the patent from you, and sat on it. Think about that. They would have sat on it. They would have, even though instead of improving their own sales with it, they would have sat on it. Why? Because they had the vacuum cleaner sales industry, exactly where they wanted it. They had this vacuum cleaner market exactly where they wanted it, and they didn't want to change anything. Even though Dyson's model would have made them countless times richer. That is the perversity of human nature when incorporated. Human beings really will. They'll conspire together to shoot themselves in the foot with the biggest ammo they can find. Yeah, there's one company that's trying to redesign the lighter-than aircraft. What they've come up with is basically a hybrid blimp. It uses hybrid motors that can also run off of batteries, and the top surface of the blimp is covered in solar cells. So it runs at about half speed off just the solar cells and batteries. So basically, it would have infinite range. It could keep flying forever. Isn't that nifty? Okay, it is 12:21. It has been a fun night. Got some work done. Got a drawing. Got a commission finished up for one gentleman. Hope you appreciate it. But I'm gonna call it a night. We'll catch y'all later. Take care of yourselves.